Hey Warriors! This Father's Day, we're teaming up with our friends over at Tricome to bring you great savings on great gifts for that great patriarch in your life. You can get 20% off your entire order at Tricome's shop by using code AOW20 at checkout. And guess what? Their Father's Day gift sets are already on sale. Get your dad one of Tricome's awesome retro trucker hats, one of their natural charcoal deodorants, and a bar of charcoal peppermint goat milk soap, already priced at 10% off each item. Use code AOW20 and you can get this set for an additional 20% off the sale price, or just get him something else entirely. However you decide to honor your father, just remember to use code AOW20 at checkout to get 20% off your entire order. Visit TricomeCo.com and click Shop Now to get started. Happy Father's Day from Rachel, Rosie, and Turner, and as always, thanks for listening.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of All Out War. I am Turner, and I am joined in the studio with Rosie. What's up, Rosie?
Hey, what's up?
And our favorite Rachel. What's up, Rachel? Rachel?
The only... No, I'm saying...
Hi. Okay, start over.
Another Rachel?
Hold on. All right, let's do this one more time. Hey, I'm Turner, and welcome to All Out War. I'm Turner, and I'm joined in the studio with Rosie, my friend. Hey, Rosie, how are you doing?
Hey, what's up?
Great. Hey, and we're also joined by the magnificent, amazing Rachel. Rachel,
Yay.
how are you? How are you, Rachel?
Hi, nice to be here.
Oh, wait. Sorry.
Oh
We're
God.
joined by the amazing Rachel. There we go. Sorry.
She's so done with our...
She's so done. She's like, by the way, this is my last time with you guys on the podcast. Oh, man. Guys, the Clintons did it again. They did it again. Did you hear? They killed another one.
I saw that.
Crazy.
Mhm.
Crazy.
Yes.
And parent suicide.
A parent suicide. Now we're going to have to go back and edit the episode, the Clinton body count that we did a couple years ago, because they keep adding to the numbers. If it wasn't so sad, it would be almost humorous. It's just crazy to me. Anyways, Rosie, what do you know, man?
Hey, did you know that a con man sold the Eiffel Tower? Not once, but almost twice.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. All right. So Count Victor Lustig was famous for being one of the smoothest con men in history, but his most impressive stunt was when he convinced 6 scrap metal dealers to bid on the Eiffel Tower. The story goes that Lustig got the idea when he read an article about how the Eiffel Tower was rusting and the high cost of its maintenance and repairs. Since the tower was only supposed to stand for 20 years,
wow.
There's another one, you go. So Parisians were saying it should be taken down entirely. Not to miss an opportunity, Lustig devised a plan to convince the city's biggest scrap metal dealers that he was a government director charged with the discreet task of selling off the Eiffel Tower's scrap metal.
Nice.
He rented limousines and gave tours of the landmark and insinuated not only that this was a very hush-hush government business, but he could be bribed into accepting the winning bid. One dealer was convinced and paid Lustig $20,000 in cash plus an additional $50,000 to make sure his was the winning bid. Once he had the money, Lustig raced off to Austria to lay low while the story broke, but it never did since the dealer was too embarrassed to report Lustig's scam. Lustig later returned to Paris and gave it another try, but he was worried one of the scrap dealers had notified the police. He fled to the U.S. where he was ultimately caught.
What year was that, did you say?
I don't think I said it.
Oh, okay.
The article
1920, something like that.
Hang on. 1935.
1935. Okay.
Yeah, 35.
That would make sense. But dude, $70,000 in 1935.
No, I'm sorry.
Would have been a lot of money.
That's when he was arrested in the 30s. Let's just say the 30s.
Yeah. 70 grand's a lot of money in the 30s.
Yeah.
I mean, that was right after the Great Depression.
It's probably like $1 million.
Yeah, it's probably a lot of money. That's cool, man. Well, I did not know that. Thank you for enlightening me.
Yeah.
Hey,
$1.2 million.
Oh, cool.
There you go.
There you go. You were pretty
Whoa.
close. 1.2.
There she is.
There she is. There she is. She's back. So we have a great episode today. We're going to talk about the Age of Aquarius and what that means and how that connects with some of the things that we might be seeing going on in our culture today. Mm-hmm. It's kind of fun. It's kind of cool. I like to connect dots. I'm a dot connector kind of guy.
Yes.
So for me, I see it all working together. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But once you listen to this, maybe you'll see it too. And anyways, so let's get into it. So sit back, grab a coffee, and enjoy.
You're listening to the All Out War podcast.
That's right, warriors. Welcome to another episode of All Out War. Hey, we have a wonderful guest with us tonight. She is a returning guest, and it's someone who I have just tremendous respect for and appreciation for. You will recognize her as soon as we get into this, but if you listen to any of our previous episodes on the Enneagram, our guest, Marcia Montenegro, was groundbreaking on this, but way back in 2014, she reminded me of this evening when we were talking. 2014, she was busting out truth on the Enneagram, and we invited her onto the podcast tonight. We're going to talk about the topic of the Age of Aquarius. I want to welcome once again Marcia. Marcia, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Turner. Thank you so much for having me, and you, Rosie, and hello to Rachel there, who works behind the scenes. I'm just so glad to be your guest again. It's just fun being with you guys.
Oh, man. Well, since, we were just chatting a few minutes ago before we hit record, and since we had you on, I know that the Enneagram has kind of blown up. And when we had you on, I just want to just kind of toot your horn there for a little bit. It really ruffled some feathers, and I want to just kind of put this out there as well. If you know someone that's in the Enneagram, go to her website. It's Christian Answers for the New Age. We'll put the link in the post in the notes section of the podcast. You can click on that and or listen to the episode with her. We have 2 episodes, part 1 and part 2 of the Enneagram, and she explains all of that. So if you have someone that that is involved or loves the Enneagram, just share it with them. I know I'm having conversations all the time with people, and I just really appreciated that. That was so much fun. Mm-hmm. But your background is perfect for what we're going to talk about tonight. Why don't you just open up for us and just share a little bit about your background and before we jump into the topic.
Okay, sure. Well, I was involved in the New Age for a good 20 years. And it was started slowly. It isn't something usually you do overnight. And I actually had interest in high school in astrology and in other religions. And that carried on through college into Eastern religions, the supernatural, things like tarot cards and reading auras and all of that. And then when I got out of college, I spent more time exploring these areas. That eventually led to me becoming a professional certified astrologer in the city of Atlanta, Georgia. And I, was doing people's birth charts and giving them advice based on their birth chart. But I also was still following my New Age interests. I got involved in Tibetan Buddhism and then Zen Buddhism, and for a number of years into the Zen Buddhist type of meditation and worldview. But I mixed it in, a little bit with Hindu views. It's still like, that's what the New Age is. It's where you draw from different sources and kind of blend them or mix them together. So I was doing that. And, I had friends who were psychics and friends who were, of course, a lot of astrologer friends and friends who were witches. And I did charts for a lot of witches. And, my chiropractor was a witch, and she got me a lot of clients because she thought I was great, and she just told all her clients about me. So, she would give them my business card. And so I was really into the New Age world there in Atlanta, Georgia, and then God intervened, and not overnight again, but slowly, opened my eyes until it came to the point where I actually saw who Jesus really was while I was reading a passage in Matthew chapter 8. And that was when I put my life into Jesus' hands and trusted in him, and I really understood who he was for the first time at that point. And that was the moment I was born again. So then after that, of course, it was very bizarre. I was sort of in limbo because I didn't really have any Christian friends. And I was in this very, very liberal church where they couldn't understand why I gave astrology up.
Wow.
Yeah, it was the whole thing. When I look back on it, it's kind of like the Twilight Zone or something. And God got me through it, because I really didn't know what was going on. I mean, I was so brand new as a Christian that it had to be the Lord who was guiding me, because there wasn't anybody else. But anyway, finally that chapter moved on, and I eventually moved from there with my son up to this area, Washington, D.C. area, and eventually found a good church, and I'm still a member of that church. So awesome. I pretty much joined that church as a fairly new believer and still a member of that church.
That's awesome.
That is awesome. You're really blessed to be able to find a single church that you can be discipled in and stay at for a long period of time. That's a blessing.
Yeah, I know. I realize that's unusual. And, there's some really good people. The man who was the pastor is not the main pastor anymore, but he was the pastor when I joined, and for a long, long, long time. And I used to go and have talks with him because I had a lot of questions. Poor guy. I had all these questions every time I went to see him. But he was always giving me scripture, and then the Holy Spirit would use that to convict me. And that really was powerful. And I made friends, and then eventually, now I am in full-time ministry. I didn't say that. I went full-time in 1998, so I've been in full-time ministry for 23 years.
Yeah.
I always say, when I say that, it makes me sound really old. I was quite young when I started, but I really wasn't. And I did some part-time ministry before that, but I was working full-time. I was a single mother. And God worked all this out. I mean, it is amazing, because I could not have engineered this myself. I can tell you that right. And I didn't even want to go full-time. I mean, the Lord worked on me for a year to get me to see that's what he wanted me to do. So my ministry is Christian Answers to the New Age, and my two main goals are to educate the church about the New Age and the occult. I include the occult. And then so that they can be better equipped to witness to others and to be discerning for themselves. And the other goal is to reach out to people in the New Age and the occult.
Yeah.
So I've done that too. So, and by the way, just to let people know, the website, you mentioned my website. Thank you. I do have if you're on Facebook, I have a Facebook page called Christian Answers for the New Age. And I post things there on the New Age and the occult. And you can follow, like and or follow the page. And actually, even if you're not on Facebook, I've been told people can see my posts.
Yeah.
Because they're public, so my page is public. That's my ministry page, not the personal. My personal page is kind of public too. Most of my posts are public. But the page I want people to know about is the Christian Answers for the New Age page.
Great.
So,
well,
very easy to find.
We'll put links to all of your contacts in the show notes so people can connect with you, which we would encourage everyone to do. You have tremendous. It's just a library of articles on your website, and it's like a blog, So there's all these articles, and it's just a great wealth of information. It's I'd treasure it, so I'm glad you put it up there. And so let's talk about the Age of Aquarius, because I kind of so what happened with me was, and the reason it piqued my interest was back in the during the election time. Actually, it was 2016 when Donald Trump just got elected as president. And Melania Trump came out for some kind of speech just following the election, and she was talking, and she came out to the song, for the 1968 song, The Age of Aquarius, the famous...
Oh,
and,
really? I didn't... Yeah.
And so it just struck me as strange. Like, why would the First Lady walk out to a song that's from 1968 that is got all this weird connotation?
Because she's got soul.
It's not really a soul song. That's what's so weird.
Isn't it an old Motown song?
No, it's like...
Am I thinking of something else?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
It's not Motown.
I think the Age of Aquarius, that's the Fifth Dimension, I think.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Well, it's part of the musical Hair.
Yes.
And I can't remember if the Fifth Dimension did the song later or if they were part of the musical. I don't know, but
I mean, it kind of has a Motown.
I'm probably thinking of something else.
Yeah.
Just disregard me.
Okay. So
Age of Aquarius.
Yeah.
This is the dawning of the Age of Aquarius.
Yes.
When the moon is in the seventh house and something like Mercury aligns with Mars, then blah, 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 then love will be in the air, blah, blah. I can't remember all the words, but the actual words to the song don't really make sense astrologically.
Okay.
Apparently they're just written because they rhyme and they go with the rhythm of everything. But if you say when the moon is in the seventh house, for example, you have to be talking about a specific chart. So are you talking about the chart of the United States? Are you talking about somebody's birth chart? Are you talking about the chart of the Empire State Building? The seventh house is part of a astrological chart that has 12 houses, and it's specific to a certain time and place. So if you just say when the moon's in the seventh house, your first question, if you know astrology, is the seventh house of what chart? But of course, that doesn't come up in the song. So that's why the song really makes sense. And Jupiter aligns with Mars. Actually, Jupiter aligning with Mars isn't always good. So, I mean, astrologically speaking, I'm not giving any credence to astrology. Let me be very clear on that.
Yeah.
I am not saying this is really something really happens when Jupiter aligns with Mars, but it's just I think they did lyrics that were catchy and used the names of planets and everything to make it sound astrological.
Yeah. Well, there was in the 60s there was just this surge of anything that it was like this revolting freedom, hippie love. And so a lot of these new age trends really took root in the 60s with the drug use and all of that. But one of the things that was interesting to me was that because it was keyed off of the song that was played when Melania Trump came out, and I think there was even like a news article that came on like on Fox News or something. They were like kind of joking about it after that, and then we started to see all of these things with the rise of the QAnon movement. And I don't know if you follow that much or not, but with the rise of the
not much.
Yeah,
I know a little bit about it, but yeah.
So they kept talking about this great awakening that was going to happen, and so in my mind, this whole Aquarius thing and the Great Awakening and this whole change of leadership, I think all of that was kind of working together in some spiritual capacity. And to the person that's uninitiated or the person that's undiscerning as a believer, it would go right over their head. But if you understand these things a little bit better, you realize there's actually some kind of undercurrent that's happening here. And and I still think it's in motion. I still think there's this movement, and I sadly in a lot of podcasts like ours where there's we call them truthers, they're not necessarily evangelical in their Christianity, but maybe they're God friendly, I like to say. They're not anti-Christ in particular, but
they're just not little Orthodox Christians.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Weird.
They kind of start patching stuff together in their own faith, but a lot of people in that community are actually embracing the Great Awakening. They're looking forward to this enlightenment, this illuminated, which is ironic because a lot of them speak so badly and they really discredit the illuminated, the Illuminati, if you will, in the Luciferian kind of mindset. So it's kind of like you don't have all the information. So I thought, hey man, it'd be great to have Marcia come on. Let's let her explain from astrological terms, what the Age of Aquarius was, what it means, and then maybe we could actually piece together from that definition some of what we're seeing in our landscape today. And
I just wanted to bring up again as well. I remember I bought this book. I think I started reading it a little bit. This is, if this has anything to do with it, but you were touching on kind of, I don't know, maybe the history and popular culture of it with the song. But the 1980 book, The Aquarian Conspiracy.
Oh, yeah.
Does that have anything? Like, I remember I bought thinking it was a conspiracy book, in the sense of like, oh, I'm going to read about JFK or something like that. Some older one. I remember I bought it years ago, but I wanted to, and I think I read through a little bit of it, and then probably it wasn't what I was looking for. It's somewhere in my boxes of books somewhere. But does that have any bearing on the overall timeline as well? And if so, I was curious
about
that.
Yes, it does. That book is about the New Age, really, and about a lot from all the different threads that kind of weave it together. So I'd never read it, but I know about it. It's a really famous, I wanted to say something real quick. I mean, QAnon supposedly was started by New Agers, which isn't too surprising because the New Age is very much into conspiracy theories. A lot of New Agers are into these real far out things, the reptilian people or whatever. These things are so crazy to me. I don't spend too much time on it. I come across it, online, or people ask me about it, and these people, they're really aliens, but they're really reptiles, but they're pretending to be people or something. I don't know, the Nephilim and all this crazy stuff that I can't even, I don't know. I think I would go bonkers if I tried to. If I had to deal with that, I would go bonkers. So I'm glad I don't.
We have some great episodes on Nephilim, so you know.
But I will say, I do know this, that the Nephilim, from like the
biblical sense,
that has been a thing that has been. I want to say, what was the author's name? Mary Edie.
Oh, Mary Baker Eddy.
Baker Eddy, yeah, I think because she wrote a book about the Nephilim. And I think she was one of the first ones. Was she a Christian Scientist?
Yes, she was Christian Scientist.
I did not know she did that.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
She wrote a book, because I remember it was one of the ones that I found when we first started recording the podcast. I was like, I have this book I bought when I was a teenager and reading about weird stuff. And then all of a sudden I started reading it. I'm like, oh, this is all straight New Age stuff. But I think she was the one that brought this idea of biblical Nephilim, like in name kind of thing, and then was trying to twist it into New Age beliefs. So it's definitely, that's very interesting that they have that crossover. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, that's because if you think about it, the Nephilim are only mentioned like twice or something in the Bible, and yet there's these hordes and hordes of theories and books and and conspiracy theories and people who talk about it, and it's like this tiny little thing in the Bible, really. That there's so much speculation and crazy stuff on it. I find it very interesting that humans tend to pick on really trivial things and make a big deal out of them. I think that's always a bad sign. To me, that's always a red flag. And that's often what cults do. They will pick one small thing in the Bible, and then that becomes their major teaching. So, there's just several examples I'm sure you all can think of, and I can think of several. But yeah, the Age of Aquarius and this awakening, I don't know if officially they're connected, but the Age of Aquarius is seen very much in the New Age by New Agers and astrologers as a time, as a sort of revolutionary transition for humanity. And what this is based on, I should probably say, why is it called the Age of Aquarius, or what does that mean? It's something called the World Ages. And each world age is 2,000 years. And it's because the North Pole because the wobble of the Earth, every 2,000 years or so, the North Pole moves a little bit and points towards a different constellation. But it's going through the zodiac just because of the position of the Earth and everything and the way that the Earth turns. It's going through the zodiac backwards. So it's not Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, which would be the normal progression of the zodiac. It's going backwards like Taurus, Aries, Pisces, Aquarius. So we're coming out of the age of Pisces and moving into the age of Aquarius. So the Pisces is the 12th sign of the zodiac, and Aquarius is the 11th sign. So we're moving from the 12th through the 11th sign. And there's no exact year for when anybody can say this happens, but because it's about 2,000 years since the age of Pisces started, we're more or less in the age of Aquarius, or we're moving into it for sure. Some people may think we're already there. And the age of Pisces, probably to understand the age of Aquarius, I should say a few things about the age of Pisces. Because Jesus Christ is supposed to be the one who ushered in the age of Pisces, the New Age Jesus. And so the Jesus of the New Age and of astrology was the avatar of the age of Pisces. He was a spiritual being who incarnated at a specific time in order to teach humanity lessons that they needed to learn. And these lessons were lessons of sacrifice, love, universal love, brotherhood, equality, peace, and martyrdom. And see, people in the New Age will say, well, look at the life of Jesus. It fits all of those things. And all of those things have to do with the sign of Pisces. So, you know, it's very convincing to the New Ager to match Jesus up to the age of Pisces. And so he was helping to usher it in because the whole 2,000 years of the age of Pisces was a cleansing or purging in preparation for the age of Aquarius. So you can look back on different events throughout, you know, from the Middle Ages or whatever, anything from the previous 2,000 years, and tie it into some kind of, you know, you could read into it, this symbolized the purging of this, or this was this. You know, you look at, for example, the revolution that went on in governments when monarchies were being overthrown, like the French Revolution and the Russian Revolution. And that was very historically, you know, very historical landmarks, events that happened, where there really was this huge change in Europe where the monarchy was, you know, overthrown. And the idea was you would have the government more equal, more for the people, and you wouldn't have these kings ruling people, or kings or queens. So, I mean, even now, like the Queen of England is just a figurehead. She doesn't really rule England. So there was a big change there in the government. And so a New Ager would say, well, see, that is part of the purging, where they were purging away these old ways of governing people. And it made way for a new kind of equality, a new kind of government. So you could pick anything, Industrial Revolution or anything, and you would find the same idea. So it's very, very convincing to people who believe this. Now, with the age of Pisces coming to an end and the age of Aquarius is coming, what does that mean? Well, Aquarius is very, very different from Pisces. It's like really different. So Pisces is a water sign. Aquarius is an air sign. Water signs are related to emotions. Air signs are related to the mind. So Aquarius is a sign that has to do with revolution and innovation with the mind. And it has to do with innovation, even scientifically. It has to do with equality and universal brotherhood. It has to do with putting the group above the individual. And these are all Aquarian concepts that you would find in Aquarius in a broad way, like if you apply it to humanity, not just to a person. There's a personal way where you talk about somebody who has certain planets in the sign of Aquarius that would supposedly give them certain characteristics. it would be a little bit related to what I'm talking about, but what I'm talking about is it's called mundane astrology. Mundane coming from the Latin word for world, which is something like mund or munde or something. So it's of the world. So this is astrology for the world, not for an individual.
Okay.
So it's mundane astrology. And Aquarius, meaning all these things, means there's a shift. And since Pisces was the purge, then we're entering new ground that's never been entered before. Some people won't be ready for this. So there's a belief among many New Agers that there will be what they call earth changes. And earth changes could be, earthquakes, huge floods, meteor striking, a country or a city or something. and a lot of people dying, basically, because those people aren't ready for the shift into the age of Aquarius. Mm-hmm. And there's also this idea that's kind of part of it and actually there is a New Age website called The Shift. It's a huge website. It's completely 100% New Age. And so this shift is this idea that you're going into a higher consciousness. So Aquarius is not just about this innovation and equality and mental freedom and everything. It's also about going into this higher consciousness, this higher spiritual consciousness for New Agers. This is how New Agers would interpret it, and astrologers. So you're on a certain level in your mind. Humanity's on a certain level in the age of Pisces, but the age of Aquarius, people who are ready will have their minds opened during the age of Aquarius. They're at the beginning of it. And so this will mean that people can go to a higher spiritual level. Now, that's a very common phrase that you hear in the New Age, a higher spiritual level. Mm-hmm. But if you try to define it, it's really, you'll get different definitions from different people because it's really very vague, a higher spiritual level. Okay, what is that? So it's not really defined. It just depends on what the person means by it. But the concept is that you're going to be more spiritual, that you're going to be more enlightened, that you're going to have a better grasp of spiritual truth. Of course, New Age type spiritual truth.
Yeah.
So you can see that most people in the New Age see this as an opening up. They see this as a good thing, as a positive thing, mostly positive. Some are aware that there's negative things about the age of Aquarius, but there are these positive things. Now, what's interesting to me is that, did you want to ask me something first?
I do, yeah. Before we move on, there's a couple things you said that I just want to ask you about. One of the things that you said was that Aquarius is ushering in, or it's a transition phase that's going to come in, and that the people that are not ready for it are going to be removed via some kind of catastrophic event, whether a meteor, earthquake, flood,
right, or several events.
So
several.
My question is the universe deciding this, and how does it know who to take out? Like, is it like, oh, I see the aura of that person, they're good. Oh, the aura of that one's so dull, I need to kill them in the meteor. I need to get them over to the meteor landing spot. Like, how does it work? Like, how do?
Yeah, that you're asking a question that doesn't have an answer. I can tell you that the way New Agers think, in their minds, they see there's some kind of almost magical, way that this all works. It's almost this kind of magical way, and somehow the people who aren't ready, that will be somehow known in some way to someone.
It's like New Age sovereignty.
Calvinism.
There's no explanation, sure, there might be a few people out there that have come up with some kind of intricate explanation. Mm-hmm. But generally speaking, I think that actually would be a good question to ask a New Ager. If they believe this particular theory that people who aren't ready will be taken out with these catastrophes, then the good question would be, But who's going to know that they aren't the people they aren't ready?
Right.
Right.
How do you know?
Yeah, and now there's a few answers I can think of. One of them might be karma. So most New Agers believe in reincarnation. So your karma would be that you would be one of the people that would be killed in kind of catastrophe, because you weren't ready. So that's kind of somehow that's another thing though that doesn't have a good explanation because who's deciding?
Right.
Like when you come back to your life, let's say you've just reincarnated to this particular life. Well, who's decided that you've come back as Turner, and living where you live and having the life that you've had? Who decided that for you? And who's going to decide your next life? So that's a funny kind of little wobbly territory there.
Yeah.
Some people say, well, you kind of know, your higher self knows. Other people say you decide yourself what your next life is going to be. So you get different answers that way too. But that might be one answer, be some kind of karma, or that even that the people who aren't ready know they aren't ready, and they will kind of
take care of it,
engineer their own destruction. Yeah. That I can see somebody coming up with that kind of answer. I'm not saying I ever heard that answer, but I'm just putting myself back in the New Age mindset. And that I can see that kind of answer happening. I'm imagining conversations on it. I hear somebody saying that.
Well, you don't recycle, and so the earth is going to take you out because you don't respect the earth, and so it's going to cleanse you. Don't worry, you'll die of pollution poisoning or something.
I just want to point out to listeners the kind of whole thing, the whole underlying thing, which is so funny about all this. Is this New Age and all these answers are ways to get around saying that there's a creator God that controls everything. Because that's what you're getting at is, well, who is the ultimate
who
judge
decides my
of the
fate,
karma?
right?
Right. Yeah. Well, it can't be a God, so it has to be something else that totally has all the attributes of what we would call a God, but it's not God because that's
the other question there's two other questions. This one's related to the who decides question, but do they believe in like Gaia? I've heard Gaia, which is the G you see in the Freemasons, symbol between the square and the compass. That's
not Gaia. Freemason isn't Gaia. I think it has to do with a master geometer or something.
Oh, okay.
Don't get the Masons mixed up with the New Age.
Okay.
That's a common mistake. There may be Masons with New Age views, but it's not. It's really it's a whole different ball of wax.
Okay.
Masonry. And it's not the same as the New Age. In fact, I knew a woman who was an astrologer, and she was in the women's branch of the Masons. She was in the women's branch. She was the only one I knew. But even though you might find some New Agers involved in Masonry, you find a lot of Christians in Masonry too.
Yeah.
Find more Christians in New Age Masonry.
I know.
Masonry really, to me, is a way to try to replicate these pagan rituals to make you feel special. That's kind of how I see Masonry. And I know it's got some really bad teachings in it, but it is not like the New Age. And it's also very structured.
Yeah.
The New Age is very unstructured, totally unstructured. That's why I don't think you'd find very many New Agers in Masonry, because they don't like structure.
Right.
So where do the...
But the Gaia is the name that a scientist named John, his last name starts with Locke, L-O-C-K. Maybe you can look him up. John Lockwood or Locke something, wrote a book. I think it was called Gaia back in the 70s. And he said that the earth is a living creature. And the earth has like consciousness. And Gaia is actually the name of a Greek goddess.
Okay.
And it's a name that he came up with. Did you find his name? Because I can't think of it.
James Lovelock?
Okay, well, I was off a little bit. I had the lock part, right? Thank you. Yes, James Lovelock. And so so he's the one who wrote, and he's a scientist, or was a scientist, and he wrote this book about Gaia and the Earth having a consciousness. So really, he was writing, even though he was a scientist, he was writing something spiritual, at least in part, by positing this consciousness for Earth. And that idea took hold, I think, when they had Earth Day. They had the first Earth Day. That was a real big deal. It was like 1977 or something like that.
Yeah, 78, 79, somewhere in there, yeah.
Yeah, it was really a really big deal when they did that, and there was the people involved in that. Some of them anyway were New Agers. And so that idea took hold in the New Age about the Earth and, Gaia, the consciousness of Earth, and Earth being, now the Earth being our mother and everything, then you're kind of moving over into Wicca and witchcraft, which is not the same as New Age, although there are a lot of people in Wicca and witchcraft who have New Age views. So they can overlap, although technically they're very different.
So are these astrological views, are they rooted back in Babylonian stuff from, like post-flood, maybe pre-flood even?
I would say post-flood. Yes, historically the first astrologers we know of were the Chaldeans, mentioned like in the Book of Daniel. So when it uses the word Chaldeans, that's often a synonym for astrologers. And they were the wise men for the king. So they would, there's no real definitive history of astrology. There's a lot of theories because either things weren't written down, or if they were written down, we didn't find, they weren't found. They were destroyed. But the idea was that they, of course, men were interested in the stars and looked at the sky because, for one thing, if they traveled by ship, they used the stars, as a guiding thing. So man was always interested in the sky and in the stars, and they noticed that certain stars moved faster than others. And of course, these were the planets, but they didn't have the concept of planets at the time, so they were just stars that moved fast. And they decided those were gods, or the homes of God. So they gave a special status to those stars, which were, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and that's it. Wait, am I leaving one out? All of them except the outer three. Mercury, I'm leaving Earth out. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn.
Yeah.
Okay, because they didn't discover Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto till the 18th, 19th, and 20th century. So they decided that there was something special about them, and they started connecting them to events on Earth. And then the men who noticed this were the men who studied the stars, and they were the wise men. They were the advisors to the kings, and so they would give the king a message. This Mars, or whatever they called it at the time, in the Babylon names were different. Like I know Marduk was Jupiter. I don't know the name for Mars, but they would say, well, Mars is very close to Jupiter or something. So that means this. And that means your enemy is going to attack. And so they were only doing this advice for kings and rulers. And the first time astrology became used for individuals was by the Greeks. In the latter part of Greece, when Greece was beginning they were kind of on the wane from their glory days, and they were beginning to absorb ideas from other cultures. And astrology, they got that from the Arabs, and they sort of took it on. And then, of course, the Romans copied the Greeks. So that became Western astrology. Astrology, for example, in China is totally not even close. It's so different. It's completely different.
Is that the ones where, like, when you go to the restaurant and they have like the year of the rat and the year of the dog? Is that Chinese? Okay.
Yeah, that's part of it, but it's apparently more detailed than that. I think it depends on, like, every 2 hours of the day is a certain thing, and so it has to do with that too. And I don't know too much about it, but it's more detailed than what you see at the Chinese restaurant. Yeah, but that is part of it. Yeah, that's part of it.
Okay.
So that became Western astrology, and now the idea of the going, from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius, I don't know when that began, but that had to be fairly recent because they didn't know enough about the wobble of the North Pole.
Right.
They didn't have that kind of information. So I'm thinking that may have come about maybe in the, I'm just guessing the 1800s or something.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever they discovered that thing about the wobble, and I don't know exactly when it was. It's called the precession of the equinox.
Yeah.
And so whenever that was discovered, then that probably became known to astrologers, and that started being used for these great world ages. I think possibly the Theosophists were into this world age thing.
Yeah.
Not positive.
Yeah, Blavatsky.
I think.
Yeah.
Blavatsky.
Blavatsky, yeah, I do remember her reading. They were into the world ages.
Yeah, I think they were. So it must have been discovered by the time she was, doing her thing.
Right.
And so this whole thing of the world ages, and then what they do is they take other things that happen and correlate it with it. You remember when right before 2012 there was this whole thing about the Mayan calendar and 2012 and how all people had all kinds of predictions about 2012. But they had that movie 2012.
Yeah.
I went and saw it, and it was like this disaster, like the Earth was going to disappear or something. So a lot of people took that idea of the Mayan calendar, which wasn't correct anyway, and 2012 kind of made it part of, the age of going into the age of Aquarius. So that's another shift. In other words, that's another shift that's happening. So there are all these shifts that are going on physically with the Earth and spiritually and mentally with the culture. And one of them, interestingly enough, and I have this in my article on the Age of Aquarius on my website, is, and I wrote I wrote that article, I can't remember when I wrote it, I think I've got the date on it, but it was quite a few years ago, and I wrote about gender equality and being genderless, no gender, that is one of the features of the Age of Aquarius, because distinctions don't matter anymore. So you don't have to have this dual distinction, male, female, and it has to be male or it has to be female. So you've got this idea that gender is fluid. And so a lot of people would look at what's going on in our culture now with all the gender issues and say, well, see, that's the Age of Aquarius. You can just see it playing out. I mean, I can even remember in the early 80s, Annie Lennox, she used to, the Eurythmics, she would dress in a man's suit.
Yeah.
And look, I don't know if she really looked masculine, but she dressed very masculine. And that was kind of it was a bit of a bold thing to do for a woman.
She'd shave her head.
Yeah, she had these kind of a little far out, innovative looks. I always thought at the time, I was a New Ager, and at the time, I thought, wow, she's really exemplifies the Age of Aquarius. That's what I thought. And so you can see things, you can see different celebrities kind of sort of modeling this idea. And then you have all the gender issues going on and, the non-binary genders and gender fluidity, et cetera, et cetera. And so people think, wow, this is so true. The Age of Aquarius is, I know that as an astrologer, that's how I would see things. That's exactly how I would interpret them. And I would think, all these other people who don't know about the Age of Aquarius and don't believe in astrology, they don't understand what's going on because they don't know about the Age of Aquarius and they don't believe in astrology and they're missing out on all this information that would help them understand. But what I wrote in my article is that if you go back, way, way back to early ancient pagan cultures, they had gender stuff. They had gods that were both genders, and gods that were no genders, and they had men dressing as women, etc. This was often connected to their spirituality, which is why God had in the Old Testament told the Israel that the women should not dress like men. It's because it was a pagan practice, probably connected to maybe one of their gods. And in Hinduism, you find that all over the place in Hinduism.
Yeah.
So these ideas aren't new; they're just resurfacing. It's just pagan spirituality resurfacing in our culture.
The old age is back.
There's nothing.
Yeah. And that's really what's going on. It's just an echo of old paganism coming back, and we're just seeing it in a different form.
Well, what's amazing to me though is, like, as you're talking about this, they put these movements in 2,000-year cycles. Christ was one of the major cycles that ushered in. It's been about 2,000 years, so now we're in the church. If it's properly reading Scripture, it should be looking for the return of Christ. Like, that's what we've been told, to do for the past 2,000 years, is to always be prepared, be ready at any moment he could return. And so you have these things that parallel with Scripture, but yet they deviate so far away from what the truth is, and it holds people into some kind of deception. But what's even more what's more amazing to me is, like, this whole gender thing that you're talking about. Like, it was weird. It was like somebody flipped a switch. And I remember it was, probably, I want to say it was like the early 2000s, maybe 2003 to 2005, somewhere in that range. I just remember it was like a law passed. I can't remember where it was, but in the United States, and that law passed, and then all of a sudden everything just started to go down from there.
You mean like the
marriage? Maybe it was
gay marriage.
Yeah, I think it was gay marriage. I think that was
marriage.
What year was that?
A Burgerfell?
I think it was around 2005, maybe, or
yeah.
I think it was 2004. Well, it started in one state, and then it went to other states.
Yeah.
But,
so it didn't become national till a few years later. I can't remember the year, but it started at maybe in Massachusetts, I'm not sure, and then it went to a couple more states. Did it? It was first state by state.
Yeah, and it was slow, but it did happen. And now, I don't know if you guys have noticed, this month it's June, so it's Pride Month. It seems so much more ramped up than it has in years past this year. Like, I don't know why. I mean, it seems like it's so much more prominent than it has been.
I think it's just more blatant.
Yeah, they don't.
Well, they're not trying to hide it anymore by putting it with, like, the kids stuff is the biggest one.
Yeah, that's the big thing. Like Nickelodeon with the
Yeah, that doesn't really have anything to do with the New Age, though.
No, I know. But
I only brought that up because I was saying that the New Age people in the New Age would see that gender thing as proof that we've entered the Age of Aquarius.
Yeah.
But people actually doing it doesn't have anything to do.
Well, I guess my thought though is, I guess my thought is, like, is there? I always think there's a spirit behind some of these things. Ephesians talks about principalities and powers in high places.
Oh, well, yeah, I think there's a spiritual. I think that there's a spiritual thing. Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's a spiritual power behind those kind of things, because they're going against God, the way God created us, and how God defines marriage. So I definitely think there's a spiritual thing there, but I just don't see it connected specifically to the New Age.
I was going to say,
I don't. The New Age isn't. The New Age. It isn't because of the New Age. If that's
no. Yeah, I'm not. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to.
I feel like I'm a little afield of my area of expertise. I'm a little uncomfortable.
Okay.
I'm a little uncomfortable. I don't like to get into social issues.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I prefer to, like, go back to the New Age and talk about what I know, because I feel like this to me is kind of like going off into another area.
Yeah, well, hopefully this will bring it back. I was going to say, like, one of the things, like what you were talking about with, I want to say, like, pointers that, like, New Age people would be using as, like, this was something that is emblematic of the Age of Aquarius. So when we see these markers, much in the same way that I guess Christians would be looking for the birth pangs for Revelation, it's not using that as an exact one-to-one, but, like, you will see these things, and then that will give credence or
validate their beliefs.
Validation, yeah. So I was going to say that much in the same way that like these things that are happening, like when you were talking about the Age of Aquarius being a mind, I can't remember how you phrased it, but a raising of like the mind more so, or intelligence.
A new state of consciousness, a higher consciousness.
I think I can't remember how
you said like Pisces was
more
emotional,
and then
Aquarius was the mind. It was like more of a thinking.
Yeah, right, yeah. It's an air sign, so that's related to the mind.
Right. So I was going to say that, like, when you said that, immediately I started thinking of, this is to kind of get back to more of that, is like, if I was looking for these signs to back up my belief of something that I already believed, like if I already believed in astrology and everything, I would be looking around at the fourth industrial revolution, so to speak, with all the technology and all that.
Right.
And so I was going to say, much not going into specifics, but I want to say, how do I say it? It's like there's the spiritual forces, like, let me back up. Like, of course, that all these things are being like that New Age people are able to look around and see all the markings, because like if Satan is really behind all the New Age and there is a real spiritual force behind all these ideas that are not of God, not of Yahweh, Christ, like,
well, he seeded the New Age already.
But I mean, like it makes sense that this stuff is happening because there's demonic forces using it to propel it. So it, like, because this stuff would die out. Basically, this is my point: is if none of these things would ever, like, if I followed astrology and none of this stuff ever actually lined up, maybe after like a couple of years, I'd look around and be like, there's no proof of this. Why would I still be yearning for it? But I think because there is things that people that are following are able to point out and see, it reinforces them and keeps them within the New Age like mindset, like, because there's stuff that they can point to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Okay.
Yeah, that things happen that make it look like it's true,
right.
Like the Age of Aquarius is true, and it's really happening. And of course, there's also the factor that people will look for what they want to see.
Exactly.
And see what they want to see. So they'll ignore anything that might go against the idea that it would be the Age of Aquarius.
Right.
They might not, that part they might just ignore, and they'll just go with all the factors that jump out at them as being related to the Age of Aquarius, and that makes it look even more real because you're just focusing on those areas.
Exactly.
So and the what you mentioned with the the technological, like, computer things. I mean, we're even beyond computer, where people are I don't know, they have something like a watch and it's like a computer, or they can, what were those Google glasses people had that they put on and they virtual reality or something? I mean, we may be way beyond that. And so we're getting like more and more advanced in those kind of things, and that would be seen as an Aquarius thing, because it would be seen as these very big, gigantic advances in technology that give man more ability to know things and do things that he couldn't do before. So it's very centered on mankind being raised, not just spiritually, but in all these other ways too, where we're going way beyond any other society, any other culture, and time.
Yeah. Well, we certainly
something
are.
that stood out a little bit when you were talking about the different, I guess, harbingers of what the new Age of Aquarius would be, was the weather, or like the cataclysmic events that might happen, and then on top of that, like the elevation of like mind and not necessarily technology, but just all the things involving the mind. And so it's really interesting to see in things like we just talked about it in the previous episode, like the Great Reset and the World Economic Forum's basically their Sustainable Development Plan. It's really interesting seeing all of their goals that they want to achieve in the next 10, 15, 20 years, and then seeing how those things like are essentially, it's almost like making it happen. And I don't think they're involved with New Age at all, but I just think it's really interesting that from their point of view, like, here's what we're going to try and do in order to, because we're seeing, you know, climate change is making all of these big cataclysmic events happen. And so a New Ager could look at that and be like, yes, it's because we're in this new age. And then, you know, we're going to see more like gender equity and gender equality across the board. And a New Ager would see, you know, more equality and enlightenment of people's minds. And so there's less like prejudice and stuff. And then it's just really interesting to see, like, you could, even from like maybe like a crunchy New Ager, you could be okay with all of the signs and things that are happening. But then also as a more like technological, mainstream-minded New Ager, you could also see all the signs of what's happening and how the world wants to fix it. And you would be okay with it. Whereas Christians are over here being like, yeah, we're in the days of Noah. Like, do you see all these birth pangs? Like, do you see all these markers for, you know, Jesus is coming back? And so we're seeing a completely different age that we're entering, where everything is being normalized that shouldn't be. And then these things are being seen as advancements. So it's very interesting to see, like, the mirroring of those two ages that we could be in, and then also like how people would accept it and even promote it via what you were saying, their kind of confirmation bias, but then also basically speaking things into existence even more. And like even within their own circles or their own following, they could be promoting these ideas even more. That way it's basically on everyone's minds that, hey, we're in this new age, we're, you know, entering these different places of enlightenment and bringing your mental state like elevated. And it's interesting because in the mainstream medicine, but then also kind of more holistic medicine, I keep seeing psychedelics being pushed as a way to deal with mental issues or PTSD or stuff. People wanting to do like MDMA, psilocybin, like all of these things as like ways, all of those things to deal with these mental issues. And so I think that there's going to be a lot of advancements, not only in those kind of more non-pharmaceutical ways, but also that's going to be more accepted in the holistic world. And then probably in the pharmaceutical world, there's going to be a lot of advancements that I keep seeing pushed by people where they want to essentially map out the entire body in a digital way. And that way they can start to get down to the root and heal people's health issues and stuff from a technological standpoint. And so it's interesting seeing how people are starting to address the mind in an almost computerized way, or like they want to get in and start to address just the physical brain with things that they might not know are spiritual. They have spiritual components to them. So I think it's very interesting. You have people coming from a maybe non-spiritual point of view, and then also a spiritual point of view, they're just really excited about this whole like age of advancement. So it's really interesting to see, and especially with your background too, just like how you've been able to confirm like this is how people have been able to see this, you know, over the past few centuries and stuff, kind of where these schools of thought came from and why it's so easy for people to accept them now. So
and it's true that even not people without the spiritual point of view are kind of would be seen as living out this Aquarius age, like getting into the idea of the brain and how do these psychedelic drugs affect the brain, and being very technical about the human body, which is not a spiritual. It is an Aquarius thing because Aquarius can be very technical. It's because it's the mind. So it has to do with thinking and using the mind. And there's a cold side of Aquarius. I should have mentioned this earlier. The sign of Aquarius originally was ruled by the planet Saturn. And Saturn was the furthest planet that they could see. And so it was the planet of limits and the planet of death. And it was also considered very cold. So Saturn in astrology even today is the planet of limitation, of authority, of coldness, emotional coldness, and limitation. So that's how Saturn, generally speaking, is seen in astrology. Now, after the planet Uranus was discovered, right at the point of the Industrial Revolution, I think it was 1781, at some point there it became the planet of Aquarius. I'm not sure who decided it, but somehow it did. And maybe they saw Aquarius as the planet, the sign of innovation, so Uranus was happening during the Industrial Revolution. But even though Uranus is now the ruler of Aquarius, and Uranus is a planet of revolution and innovation and upsetting the old order, Saturn is still the co-ruler with Uranus of Aquarius. It's the co-ruler. So anybody who knows astrology or any astrologer would say you have to consider the influence of Saturn as well as Uranus on Aquarius. So that comes into play, and Saturn is nobody's favorite planet.
Right.
Because it's not a fun planet.
Right.
It's not,
well,
it's a planet of authority and structure and limitations and there's all good things about that, but most people don't get excited like, oh, yay, limitations. Oh, yay, structure. Especially New Agers.
Yeah.
So they don't like structure. There's a side to Aquarius. Actually, when I was an astrologer, I used to point this out to people. And I said, we have to remember that Saturn co-rules Aquarius, and Saturn has to do with structure and limitation, and there's going to be limitations in the age of Aquarius. There's going to be a coldness to it that we have to watch out for. It can get to where the structure is fighting with the innovation, and it can get too chaotic. So I used to I was always like the, rain on people's parades about the age of Aquarius. Because I wasn't all yippee yay about it. I had my reservations about it being such a great time.
I do know that in the occult, Saturn is associated with Satan. There's this occult kind of leaning towards the Saturnial, I'm trying to think of what the wording is right now because it just popped into my head a few minutes ago.
Oh, I'm not sure.
But yeah, from what I've heard in the occult, not necessarily the New Age, but Saturn and Satan have a connection there, like the Black Cube and all that kind of stuff too. But
I don't know. I never heard that. I never heard that.
Okay. Well, it's not a New Age thing though. That I know that. But so what is the next? So we say so for an astrologer, they move through Aquarius. What is the next? What is the next sign to come? What is the next? Oh,
in 2,000 years.
Yeah.
Well, here we go. It's the age of Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn. So, and I used to point that out too. And I used to say, well, everybody's so excited about the age of Aquarius. I mean, are they going to be that excited about the age of Capricorn? Because age of Capricorn is going to be definitely very, very different from the age of Aquarius. And so, to me, because it's almost like even though in the New Age and in astrology you have this cyclical view of things, there's like no final ending. It's always like a cycle, going into another cycle, which is actually very pagan because that is the way they don't have linear views of time. And I always used to think about that though, because everyone's talking about Aquarius as though it's like the final age. Like everything's going to work out great and we're going to be free and there's going to be brotherhood and world equality and all this stuff. And then I'm thinking, but then down the road, we're going to get into the age of Capricorn. Mm-hmm. And, it's not going to be the age of Aquarius forever. And of course, after the age of Capricorn, we'll have the age of Sagittarius. So, it's going to move on to these different cycles. So it's not like Age of Aquarius is the final chapter in the story of humanity. But that's often how in the New Age they see it, because, you know, they're alive at this time and they're living at the time, the transition to the Age of Aquarius. So, you know, then they see all these good things about Aquarius. So that tends to be, you know, what gets them excited. Just like the song Harry. It's stunning, and it's a very like happy, upbeat song. Yeah, it's very, very upbeat. Incredibly, I can't sing, or I would sing a few notes for you, but it's very upbeat. and you know, that tends to be, people tend to be somewhat more optimistic than pessimistic about the Age of Aquarius.
Wow. Well, I definitely, when we think about like what some of these markers of what New Agers believe about, and what, you know, evidently what the stars are trying to reveal, when I look at our current culture, I see the application of those things. That's why it's not hard for me to see a hidden hand behind it all, which I think what Rosie and Rachel said was really cool, because what you guys were basically saying is that the New Age deceives someone into basically being willing to accept something that maybe they wouldn't otherwise enjoy or accept. They'd maybe resist, and so it takes a whole segment of our culture and actually sidelines it from any opposition of what the enemy wants to try and do, to move it further away from God, to enslave people, to deceive them into away from worshiping the one true living God and you know, Jesus. And so and this is why I get, you know, like I'm not a religious person at all, and legalism is like, it makes me throw up in my mouth. But, I try and warn believers about horoscopes and things like this, because, you know, it's like what you were saying, Rosie. It's like, oh, I see these markers. Well, if it didn't ever happen, I wouldn't follow it. Like I would just give up on it. But the problem is that horoscopes are they're like a clock. That doesn't have batteries in it. It's right twice a day. If you read it, if you read it at the right time, it's gonna be true for that day. You know, it doesn't mean that it's always true. You know,
right? Well, I have an article on my website called something like "To Read or Not Read," horoscopes to read or not read. It's on horoscopes. The title is something like that. I actually wrote it originally for a Christian singles magazine years ago. And I talked specifically about, you know, horoscopes and reading horoscopes. And I've addressed that before with people, you know, because it's an easy hook to get you interested. And if you're reading it and one day you're reading it and it's true, it really happens, what it says happens, then you start getting curious. Like, I wonder what it's going to say tomorrow. You know,
right?
And I wonder if it's going to say something that comes true again. And some people, we always think that we can resist these kind of things, but actually, it's actually very easy for our curiosity to kind of get us into trouble. And you know, then you keep reading it. I mean, I have met people who eventually went to an astrologer because they read horoscope columns, and they got interested in astrology through horoscope columns. I mean, that's how I got interested in it. Right. When I was a teenager, I read horoscope columns in the news. I was a very avid newspaper reader, oddly enough. Starting at age 13, I was just incredibly interested in reading newspapers, and I read it every day. I read the Washington Post every day when we were living in the Washington, D.C. area. And my father was a Foreign Service officer, and he would talk about things going on in the world. So I had kind of a natural interest. But, of course, in that newspaper was the funnies and the horoscope page. And I read it, and I would read it for my birth sign, my zodiac sign. And it was by Jean Dixon, and I got very interested in Jean Dixon, the column. And actually went to hear her speak she spoke at the National Press Club one year. And that got me interested in astrology. So,
yeah, I was going to say this was like a personal, much in the same way. I mean, maybe I don't look like someone who would fall for it. It's not the right term, but get transfixed with it for a little bit, I think is better. And it's still like, it pops up. I don't know if I talked about this last time when we were talking, but I went to go visit a friend, or I don't know, a couple of years ago, and she was telling me about she was doing some really weird. It was like not kind of new agey. It had something to do with Native American spirits in some way, and whatever. Anyway, so she informed me after that she had done some reading for me. And like, I mean, maybe this is a little too personal, but she was like, do you want to know what it said? And I was like, well, yeah, of course I want to know what it said. Like, I just was, it started off as curiosity. And she had said two things something that like in the future I was worried about. And like still they pop up because now, like I know all the Bible verses about like burning witches and stuff like that, or like they're not kindly to witchcraft. And I was gonna say, not that it's I don't know what the right term is, but like every once in a while when I think about something that is in line with that thing that one of the two things that she had told me about, like one of them is something like that lines up with what I want, like it's something I've been praying for. And so it's something like, well, part of me is like, well, I hope that was not a complete lie from Satan, because that's something that I actually do want and I've been praying to God for, like something like that. I'm speaking in very, very general terms, but I mean, that was probably 4 or 5 years ago, and it's still I feel that pull every once in a while that like maybe I should ask her to do this thing again, and it's just this fleeting idea.
Yeah, but you're describing exactly what I see in a lot of people, like Christians, who sometimes go to one of these people out of desperation. They're just desperate. Things are falling apart. Maybe their marriage is falling apart. They're desperate. Somebody tells them, oh, I know this woman who will really help you. She'll give you this great advice. It's a psychic, or an astrologer. And they'll go there or maybe they'll pray and they don't feel God's giving them answers. And the psychic or whoever will say some things that really hit home for that person. Mm-hmm. And then they go away and they're like, they can't get it out of their head.
Yeah.
It's like you can't unsee a picture, and you can't unhear what that psychic told you. And so then it sticks with you, and it works on you. And like it did with you, like you're kind of like this little part of you is like, oh, I wonder, maybe I could ask her about that again or whatever. Yeah. It's that little seed that gets planted. And people don't understand how powerful that can be. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the seduction of psychics, of astrologers, of mediums, all of these people who are using some kind of form of divination or spirit contact, because that's what astrology is, it's divination. Mm-hmm. And they're using that, and that has an effect on the person who's getting the reading. Mm-hmm. So even if you go there thinking, I'm not going to believe this, or I don't really believe this, or whatever, there's a little seed will get planted. And I tell people who have gone through this, because sometimes they will contact me and tell me, I went to this astrologer and she told me this and this and this, and some of it came true, and now the Lord's convicted me, it was wrong, I shouldn't have gone, but I can't get what she said out of my head, Mm-hmm. And I say, okay, what you need to do, I said, first of all, have you repented? Have you told God you're sorry you went and saw this woman? And then they might say, yeah, usually they say, yes, I have. And then I say, okay, you're forgiven. If you have trusted Christ, you're forgiven. What you need to do is pray and ask God to help you get this out of your head. Mm-hmm. You need to ask God's help to get this, remove this mm-hmm. from your mind, and read scripture a lot. Yeah. And get that to help push it out of your mind, because those little tiny zingers there can really pack a punch. Mm-hmm. I've talked to too many people who have been through this.
Yeah.
This is like, your story is very familiar to me.
Yeah. And I was going to say, it's, when you're just talking about that it's divination, I read it, I was reading something very recently that summed it up just super succinctly, is like, because the Bible, you said all of this is spirit divination, and the Bible speaks directly against spirit divination. And so basically the point was, the Bible wouldn't warn against doing stuff that you couldn't do. Like, it would be silly for God to say, like, hey, don't do this thing if it didn't do anything. Like, he's not warning you because it's not possible. He's warning you because it is possible, and it's not from him. So I was just going to say, it's just like, it's right there in the Bible, not because it doesn't exist. It's because it's very much so. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, God, I always say, take God's, God, it thinks it's serious enough to bring it up.
Yeah, exactly.
So if he thinks it's serious enough to bring it up, then we should be paying attention.
Yeah.
We can't dismiss it or laugh it off or think we're kind of, immune to it, because, we're not. And I know that little part of you, I can remember when I was a fairly new Christian, I wasn't real new, but I was a younger Christian, and I was speaking at some conferences, and these were all counter cult conferences. And most of the people who spoke and who I got to know were experts in cults and dealt with dealing with people who get into cults and everything like that. And, I remember a couple of them saying they would not go, for example, to a seminar, like one of those seminars like Werner Erhard used to do, the S seminar in the 70s, where you're in the room with other people, you can't leave the room, and he's doing things. Because what he's doing, mind tricks on you. It's really a mind manipulation is what's going on. And these people said, I remember this one guy said, even though I know exactly how he does it and I know what's going on, I would not go there myself. I would not put myself into that kind of situation, because he recognized how powerful it is and how weak we can be, and you can just get affected by things more than you think. And I don't say this, I'm not an alarmist at all. And I believe in, not giving the devil too much credit, because God's in charge. And as a Christian, I believe that your salvation is secure, and you have the Holy Spirit in you. But at the same time, we know that we can be tempted, and we can't be fooled, because most of the New Testament is written to warn about false teachers. I mean, large parts of it are. So God knows that we can come under the influence of something that's false, and these kind of things have a spiritual power behind them. And it's just better to, not get into the situation at all.
Amen. That's right. Roselle, encourage you. Two things. One is that God gives you the desires of your heart. So not only does he...
Oh, you're bringing that up. Yeah.
I'm just saying, not only does he place the desires within your heart oftentimes, especially if you belong to him and you're seeking him out, but he fulfills them. According to his will. So I would just say, be encouraged by that, Lord, I have this, whatever it is. A lot of people go to palm readers and horoscope because they have a issue that they want an answer for, that they're longing for. Maybe it's a relationship, or maybe it's a health thing, or... In
my defense. I was trying to be very declarative about it. She did it for me without my knowledge, and then asked if I wanted the answers.
That's even more crazy.
I'm just saying.
That's even more crazy.
I didn't go seeking it out.
I know. No,
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, you didn't go there asking for it.
Right.
And was she using cards, or was she doing a reading like a psychic?
I was not presently in the room. So she texted me.
She was in another room.
She was in her apartment, and I was not in her apartment, and I was with the...
Okay.
And so she texted me and said, hey, I just did this reading of you. Do you want to know the answers? On your behalf. So.
Okay, so you don't know what how she did the reading. I was just a little curious about what she did, but
Yeah.
so you didn't see what she did. You don't know what she did, right?
No, she said it was some sort of trance that she went into and asked questions. That's
Wow.
Oh, okay. Well, then that's more like a psychic.
Yeah.
That's actually like a psychic. Yeah.
Wow.
So not doing art.
No,
it's
no.
More like a, yeah, and that's and then see, it's so easy if she says, "Well, do you want to know what I found out?" And then of course, most of us are
Right.
going to be like, "Yeah, I'm curious. What, what did you find out about me?"
Yeah.
Like, it's just such a natural response that we would have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed. There's always this curiosity about what my future holds. I mean, 90% of our prayers are about the future. When we talk to Jesus, it's like, Lord, what about this? What about that? But yeah, there is a natural inclination to know stuff. But so God does give us the desires of our hearts. If you belong to Him and you're praying for His will, He begins to take a believer's heart and deposit in them desires that they wouldn't otherwise necessarily have. But He also fulfills them. I remember not ever wanting to be married when I was younger, and then getting saved, and then about, I don't know, I got saved at 17. When I was about 23, 24, I started to really have this strong desire to be married. And it came out of nowhere, and it was really the Lord working on me to prepare me for marriage, because He had that in His will for my life. And so He was kind of moving my heart according to His will and depositing these desires within me according to His will, and then fulfilling them as I was willing to accept them. And it was hard to do, because I had to go through a season of waiting as well, waiting for that to be fulfilled. So I had to trust Him, and He kind of tests your heart, and God's a God who tests His children, which is hard to believe, but He does,
Right, that's true.
Hey, I know that it's been an hour and 20 and it's getting late. I don't want to keep you later than you can.
Okay. I don't know. Did you have more questions about it? Do you think I covered it enough?
I'm going to be listening to this again and dissecting more of what you said, because I was writing lots of notes. I have 2 pages of notes that I wrote while you were.
I you taking notes. Yeah.
Yeah. But for me, like in a big picture sort of sense, from what you said, like even like I started off talking about Donald Trump and how he was such a disruptor of politics, and then you had after him, it seems like this Age of Aquarius does fit well with a lot of these things that we're seeing. Not that I believe in it, but that there is something behind that, and for people to be proclaiming that and labeling that, as we're seeing, the rise of all these things. When we touched on so many of them, during it, it seems like there's something to that, in the sense that there is a spiritual force behind it. Obviously, for all of us here, we know God's sovereign. We read the Bible. We know the prophecies about the end times and when, the signs to look for, and we know what Jesus has promised us. And so for us, we're looking at it from a little bit different angle than someone who's an unbeliever, or even someone who's maybe a baby believer who just doesn't know and maybe had interest in the New Age as they were coming out of, into faith and out of the world. And so I would just encourage our listeners to think about some of those things, as they're actually great avenues to start a conversation for evangelism with someone. It's like really interesting because you can ask them the question, well, do you believe that? Then, well, who is this universe that's deciding who gets to live and how you're going to be reincarnated? Who is it? What is it?
Yeah.
Is it just
there are a lot of good questions to ask on that. And also, before I forget, I want to point out one of my articles I have is called The Piscean Jesus, and it's about Jesus as he's seen in astrology in the New Age as the avatar of the Age of Pisces. I have, and it actually was a paper I wrote in seminary, and I modified it a bit for my website. So it's on my website under in-depth articles.
Okay.
Because those are usually my longer articles. I just call them in-depth articles, and they don't really fit anywhere else. So that's there. So people who want to read, and of course I discuss the Age of Pisces in that article. because I'm showing how they connect Jesus to it.
Yeah.
And then that would kind of go with the Age of Aquarius article, because you know, you get both, understand both viewpoints.
Yeah.
I have a quick question.
Okay, yeah, I was going to ask you if you had one.
With Jesus being the avatar of the Age of Pisces, who would be, I don't know, representatives of the Age of Aquarius?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that, because your question reminded me of something I wanted to say that I forgot to say. So let me say it. One of the changes of the Age of Pisces to the Age of Aquarius is that supposedly we go from the outer teacher to the inner teacher. So the outer teacher is the spiritual leaders of the last 2,000 years, or who would be considered the spiritual leaders in the New Age, you know, different people. And we go from that, and gurus, you know, all the gurus from India, go from that to the inner teacher. So we have our own inner teacher. And so there isn't somebody representative of the avatar for the Age of Aquarius, because it's us ourselves. It's the inner teacher.
Is that like a Christ consciousness?
Yes, it might be explained that way. That would be because if you attain the Christ consciousness, then you are your own teacher, your own inner teacher. So I'm so glad you asked that, Rachel, because it came to my mind a couple of times when we were talking, but it wasn't quite the right moment to say it, and I was like, I've got to remember to say that, and then I forgot. So your question was perfect. And I've seen that talked about, and there seems to be a very big emphasis on self, and everything that you need is within you. And just very much like it's all about your truth, and you know, you creating your own reality and your own consciousness. And yes, the Christ consciousness being something that comes out of you, not even coming from a person. And it's something I've even seen among Christians, or even deconstructing evangelicals, is that they're moving towards the thought of, I don't need anyone, not even a savior. The only reason Jesus came was to be a kind of example of what I can do. And so it's very interesting to see how everything becomes very self-centered. Very self-oriented. Yeah, now having said all that, I will say there's a couple of ideas out there that, for example, Theosophy had this, said there was a big world teacher, and they had a guy that they were trying to promote as this world teacher, and he decided he didn't want to be the world teacher. It's really funny. He sort of rebelled and went away, and he made them very, very angry. I'll tell you the book to get that tells the most wonderful stories about the Theosophical Society. It's called Madame Blavatsky's Baboon. And it's by a journalist whose name has just completely gone out of my head.
Peter Washington?
I can't think of his name.
Peter Washington.
Thank you. Peter Washington. He's a journalist. It is one of the most entertaining books I've ever read. I guarantee you, once you start reading it, you won't be able to put it down. But he tells all the inside stories, the infightings, the little conflicts, the little personality, tantrums that they would have, and it's so interesting. He goes through all the major people, including a lot of people who were followers of Theosophy. And so that he talks, that's in there. That's where I got that from. And so he just left. He didn't want to be the world teacher. Now I understand that Islam has some kind of prophecy about somebody coming. It sounds almost like something from Revelation. Somebody coming on a white horse or something. I don't know very much about it. And then there's an idea the Mormons have that the country will get in trouble. Of course, the United States is like, they think is like, the Holy Land.
New Israel, yeah.
And there'll be some kind of crises, and then a Mormon will take over and lead everybody, to peace and safety or whatever. So those ideas are not really New Age, but they're kind of out there where there are other people that are being looked to. But in the New Age, the Age of Aquarius is supposed to be the inner teacher. So good question, Rachel.
I just see the Muslims and the Mormons getting set up for the Antichrist. That's all I see.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's going to lead to a lot of deception, those ideas.
Except he's probably not going to be Mormon. I'll just go on the record and say that.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, this has been awesome, Marcia. We really appreciate every time you come on. It's always so much fun, and I'm just always,
I enjoy it.
I'm always just like blown away. Like you sit there and you just start, cool, and it just comes out of you, and it's always just so. It's like I'm a little bit jealous because like I can't remember the sandwich I had for lunch, much less like details about astrology.
Well, it's funny. I can remember all this stuff connected to my ministry, but I couldn't tell you what I ate yesterday either. I mean, my short-term memory is absolutely horrible. And or where I was last Thursday, I have to really think about it and look at my phone on my calendar, but for some reason, all this stuff, maybe because I was involved for so many years, and then I have been doing the ministry in the area, and I've gone over and over a lot of it several times.
Yeah.
Either writing about it or talking about it. It just kind of embedded in my brain. And so once you open the door, I'm like, hard to get me to stop talking.
Well, we're glad because it makes for a tremendous amount of great information that's very helpful. Yes. And so I just want to encourage our listeners again to go check out her website. It's Christian Answers for the New Age. We'll put the links in our show notes. And check her out on Facebook as well, if you're hanging out in Facebook, and that seems to be a place where you can really interact with Marcia more personally. And Marcia, you're like I always say, you have an open door here. If there's something that you feel like you want to share with us ever, just you know how to get in touch with me. Just let us know. You always are welcome.
All right. You.
Yeah, and
thank you very much.
Yeah, and I just appreciate your work back in 2014, disrupting the Enneagram before it ever got a hold, and you're just still disrupting, which is great. We want that to be disrupted.
My first article on the Enneagram actually was on my website. Was in 2011.
Wow.
Yeah,
it's when I saw the Enneagram in the Progressive Church.
Yeah.
And they were doing seminars, and because Rob Bell and Brian McLaren, they had all embraced Richard Rohr.
Mm-hmm.
And he had that book on the Enneagram. I think that's how it happened. And all of a sudden at their conferences, they were having somebody speak on the Enneagram. And I thought, okay, this is a little, I don't quite see this getting into the evangelical church, but it's a little too close for comfort. Mm-hmm. I think people need to know about it if these guys are talking about it. So I wrote my article in 2011, my website. Got the date on there, 2011.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, there's your proof. Yeah. You're a prophet. You don't even realize it.
Well, thanks so much for having me on, guys. I enjoyed the questions from everybody, and it's nice that you have a young partner here. You've got somebody quite younger than you two guys. No offense.
And much prettier than both of us.
Right, yeah. Well, it's funny because we represent basically Rachel's in the 20s. I think Rose, you just turned 30, right? Are you
31?
You turned 31, and then I leapfrogged the 40s, and I just turned 50. So,
oh my God, each generation.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to tell you my decade, but it's definitely above Rosie's. Rosie, you're still young, so you're good.
Yeah. I'm not young.
You're Generation Z.
Yeah.
Right. Generation Z.
I'm about to be 29 this year.
Oh, are you Generation Y? I've forgotten the dates for all of those generations. The Generation Y?
I think either that or I don't know if I'm a millennial.
I think you are
weird.
Yeah.
I'm like in that weird little because I'm 92, so it's kind of like that weird little gap. I don't know.
Yeah.
I relate more with Generation Y than millennials, that's for sure.
Yeah. Oh, really? You relate to that more?
You're kind of an Aquarian generational person. You're in transition.
Yeah, because I know Generation Z. Actually, the oldest of them, I think, they're only like 22 or 23, something like that.
Yeah.
So the oldest Generation Z, and then I know millennials started around 1980, 81. And went up to 2000, I think.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
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 And after that is Generation Y. So that's kind of more or less.
Yeah.
You know, it might be off too. Yeah. So Rosie, you're a millennial.
I am,
Right?
sadly. Yeah. Yeah. 1990. Right.
Okay.
Right at the beginning.
Okay.
What's the
Well,
one?
I'm a baby. You know. I mean,
Well, I was gonna say it's weird for me. I grew up most of my childhood overseas, so I wasn't even.
I did too.
Yeah.
I did too.
Well, so yeah, I was like totally disconnected from anything
Yes.
that they call us third culture kids, because I came back
Yes.
to America and they're like, hey, like, do you know about this? And I'm like, I have no clue what you're talking about. They're like, well, how do you not know about this? And I'm like, I don't know, because I was living in a third world country and like we didn't have anything like that. And then, I'd pull up my cell phone. I'm like, oh, did you have a cell phone? And they're like, we don't have cell phones. Like, I've had one since I was 8. They're like, yeah, I guess it kind of sucks. It was just like it's just totally different. And it wasn't.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, I spent most of my, not in a third world country, but most of my childhood overseas because of my father being a foreign service officer.
Right.
So, yeah, when I came back here and went into the schools, I could not relate to anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so different. It was like being in another world, and I just could not relate at all. It was very hard. I never did do all that great in school.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever did.
Yeah.
I got in college, it got a little better, but because that was so different. But
yeah. But that's why I feel like so disconnected from like as a millennial, because it's like, oh, do you remember the 90s? Well, I remember my weird version of the 90s, which was not what the 90s of all the millennial. Like you
didn't go through all like the music and everything that everybody was listening to, and
we got everything about a year later, and it was like a bootlegged, ripped off version. And I remember this has nothing to do with it, but my dad would come back. He would do these like a TDY. He'd come back and go like to Western Europe or back to America, and then he would come back, and it was maybe once a year, and he would just he ran to like whatever, like ask people at work, hey, what are your kids into? And then he would just pick up like, oh, I don't know if you'll like this, but he would just come back with like a bunch of books, and he's like, these are what the kids apparently are into. You should probably do this so you don't get like, you're not weird when we move back in a couple of years or something. So it was.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah.
I know. I have a good friend who grew up. His parents were missionaries, and they were in France, but I mean the culture there is really different from the United States.
Yeah.
And he said he came back when they came back to this country. He was in high school, and he said, it was kind of blew him away. He said he'd meet these guys with this crazy hair, and they'd be like, "Hey, you want a party, man?" I'd be like, "What are you talking about?" I mean, that's like, everything was like the way he tells it is very funny, but he was like, he was just totally like it was another language, and he couldn't. It just was so different. The culture was so different. So that's kind of what you're saying. It's really.
Well, it was funny. So I did. We moved back to North DC area. I'll say that same area, and it's even though it's like a very transient area, it's not an international transient area. So like people, I don't know. But I came back, and prior to doing high school, I came back my sophomore year. We had been living in Germany prior to that. And so when I came in, what's that?
Yeah, so I lived in Germany. We lived in Berlin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, so I showed up and everyone was like, they're like, oh, this is the new kid from Germany. And I'm like, well, I just lived there for a couple of years. I'm not German. And they're like, well, you speak really good English. I'm like, yeah, because I'm American. And they're like, well, you said you were from Germany. And I'm like, yeah, we just lived there for 4 years. Like, Americans can do that. Well, they're like, do you speak German? I'm like, well, yeah. And they're like, yeah, man, I don't understand it. And I'm like, because I'm American. We spoke English at my house. I hung out with American friends. And they just could not comprehend it.
I know. It's so funny. Oh, my goodness. Oh, wow.
Well, Marcia, thanks again for
you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I kind of pushed back a little bit there on when you were getting into the some point there about the social things, and I said I don't really want to comment on the social issues.
Not a
Turner's
problem.
just a jerk.
I'm a jerk. Yeah, no problem.
It just I felt like it was getting away from what I really wanted to talk about, and I'm very, because of my ministry, I try not to make any kind of statements about like gay people if I can help it, because I want them to feel comfortable talking to me.
Yeah.
So I don't hide my views, but I try not to make that a topic of conversation. And it's not really related to the New Age, so I generally stay away from it.
No problem. No, you don't have to explain anything. No, you're fine.
Okay.
No worries. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's all good. Well, thanks again for coming on, and we'll have you back on again when we'll think of something really fun to talk about. It won't be social issues at all. It'll be something else fun. But
I'm sure. I could come on and just talk about Richard Rohr.
Yeah. Well, I know. Some people need to know about him, so maybe that's a good topic we could bring you on about. So. I
mean, really, because I have been reading stuff and listening to this man talk since 2013, and I feel like I really know. I feel like I know him. That's how I feel. I feel like I know the man. I know his views.
Yeah.
And he is getting more influential. So, a lot of people really don't realize what he believes. They just think he's a Franciscan friar, so he's a Christian.
Yeah.
That's what they think.
Yep. It's sad. It's sad. But,
well,
thanks
so
so
that's
much.
my idea.
Okay. Well, we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay. Thank you again for having me. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks for what you do.
So good to get to meet you finally. I wasn't around for the past two, but yeah, really good to meet you.
Yeah, I know. I'm glad to meet you. If you have any questions about how to talk to that young lady about war, just get my email from Turner, and I'll be happy to give you some ideas or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to hit my full X here. Okay.